Hey, what's up everyone? This is Ian. Hope you're doing well. In this video, I just wanted to briefly touch on the subject of inspiration. If you watch my other videos relating to Spore, I said finding inspiration or researching something you want to draw can be one of the most interesting and intriguing parts of the design process. Breathing believability and life into your subject matter, to me, is just as fun as the physical act of drawing. The minutiae and world building behind whatever it is you're making can be as complex, if not more so, than the physical work itself. Like I've stated before, inspiration can strike at any time and from all sorts of unique places: movies, video games, books, prompts, conversing with others, or simply going for a walk. Taking in the real physical world can generate all sorts of imaginative ideas. One of the greatest things about being a creative is the ability to manipulate the real world through imagination, to make new and innovative ideas no other person other than yourself could ever dream of. And that's why art is so amazing. It's your own subjective viewpoint of the world, and why each artist's abilities, no matter their skill, should be appreciated. Artists feed off one another. It's like a never-ending game of imaginative telephone. Seeing others' work gives you your own ideas, which spreads even further to others, and the cycle continues from there. With all that being said though, as easy as it is to find inspiration in abundance, it also can disappear just as quickly. A paradox for sure. Artist block can be extremely frustrating. All artists find themselves in periods where they seem to be lacking creativity or are artistically stagnant. Maybe you find yourself drawing the same thing too much, or not challenging yourself enough, or just not drawing at all. That's why I'm making this video. This is where I wanted to talk about where I get all my inspiration from these days. As a concept artist, you don't have the liberty of time. You are expected to come up with dozens of novel ideas on a whim, which at times seems almost like an impossible task. And that's where I want to talk about my secret weapon: ancient video games. Hear me out. You might be wondering, what the hell is this on the screen? Some Matrix code? Bear with me while I explain to the younger generation. If you didn't know, long before the video game industry relied so heavily on graphics, they were more based around their customers' own imaginations. Coming off the D&D era, the world was in a perfect place with limited computing power and an overabundance of imagination. Video games were based on a much different creative metric at the time. Here's a graph to help explain. Our Lord and Savior, Tarn Adams, creator extraordinaire of Dwarf Fortress, explained in an awesome documentary about how he wished, in so many words, the video game world continued to follow this trajectory, one based more so on a game's systems and mechanics, and less on the ever-evolving graphics trend. Seeing as Dwarf Fortress is one of my favorite games and prudent to this discussion, I should really quickly touch on the fact that it is relatively new. Its first version launching around 2006. It was a love letter to the games I will be talking about in this video. It's based around the intricate roguelikes Tarn grew up playing in the 80s. So though not an original, it's still very relative to this conversation. The game purposely did not use graphics as to not hinder its development process, instead deciding to focus more so on enriching the game's exceedingly complex simulation. Only as recent as 2022 did it finally acquire a sprite-based tile set for its Steam release. Many older games, especially in the CRPG and roguelike genres, were heavily reliant on complex gameplay and not hindered by the time it would take to design 3D models or even 2D sprites for that matter. That wasn't even an option at the time. CRPGs and roguelikes relied heavily on things such as dice rolls, numbers, and text to explain what was going on during gameplay, stuff directly copied from the pen and paper RPGs that were so popular at the time. Again, it was up to one's own imagination while playing to imagine the scenarios unfolding before them. To program everything that was going on in-game at the time would have been simply impossible. Things such as limited memory, coupled with the amount of time it would take to concept, animate, and implement each complex system, meant there had to be placeholders. The ambitions of these games were just too grandiose for the era's technological limitations. This didn't stop programmers from pioneering these systems, though. Some ways these visual corners were cut was by simply displaying combat through text, using sentences in sequential order of your fight sequence with whatever monster you happen to encounter, each one indicating the amount of damage inflicted by a number. As graphics progress, you might even see a flickering sprite, indicating you hit your target with a successful weapon strike, but let's not get ahead of ourselves with luxuries such as colored graphics. On the contrary, something like Galaga was seen in real time. Each movement you make on the joystick is shown instantaneously as a movement of the ship you're piloting on screen. In closing, as you can see, there's two very distinct styles of video games evolving at the time. Ones that were much slower paced, based around ever-growing complex systems and the imagination of their audiences, and others based on real-time actions and a player's reflexes. These gaming trends are still very prevalent in the modern gaming ecosystem, with RPGs still thriving and reflex-based arcade games evolving into the likes of popular action-adventure titles and modern FPSs. All these genres often crossing over with each other. Back to not having the luxury or crutch of complex graphics, this left early developers with the challenge of making their games interesting with only minimal visuals, but also left them with an indefinitely longer time to work out the intricacies of their games. Early examples of this were things such as complex inventory systems or dungeons that were procedurally generated each time you entered a new one, your character wearing multiple pieces of unique gear, or even magic systems. All these things were novel at the time. But times were tough and graphics limited. The adventurer you played as didn't look like this, but more like this, a simple ASCII character. What's ASCII, you might ask?
Oh, brother, this guy stinks!
In a nutshell, ASCII was a series of symbols created around the 1960s to try to standardize certain computer languages. There were multiple systems using their own unique coding schemes, making data transfer at the time exceedingly hard. ASCII aimed to bridge the gap between them all with one universal character language. Later, ASCII was adopted by many early games as a sort of placeholder for graphics. ASCII's characters that were once used for data transfer purposes were now being used to represent goblins and castle walls, now standardizing a whole new set of information: video games. So interestingly, the complex systems we learned about earlier that were usually text-based and a major hindrance visually to early games and programming were finally allowed to be shown using these crude visuals. A perfect example of this can be seen here. Yes, a hallway can look like this, but at its most basic level, it can also look like this. They both are, at the end of the day, a hallway inside of a dungeon, your imagination filling in the visual fidelity in the latter example. You might see where I'm going with this. These simple graphics left immense room for programming freedom when designing games, but also interpretation of characters and environments by the players who are playing them. Not only is there room to come with your own ideas visually, but they also have incredible amounts of non-linear and emergent gameplay, things you're left to imagine on your own. Characters' backstories, lineages, creatures, fantasy races, the list goes on indefinitely. Again, to quote Tarn about his own game Dwarf Fortress, it's less of a game and more of a story generator. A quick tangent, many modern games, especially by smaller indie studios, sacrifice graphic fidelity to spend more time and resources focusing on better gameplay and mechanics. On top of that, many of these new developers purposely use systems reminiscent of or downright copy retro games, even ones I've shown earlier in this video. That's what this video is all about, modern interpretation of classic systems. These games have become their own specific genres. Even in the era of modern gaming, they have been left intentionally crude, limited, or simplified, usually harkening back to a time when the player was left to fill in the blanks or to keep a game exceedingly challenging. A lot of times, they are just easier to make for developers with limited staff or budget. For whatever reason, these games are great, and it's a promising trend amongst newer developers. These games have limitless drawing prompts and creative potential. Don't get me wrong, I enjoy seeing things happen in real time too. But like how many say a book will always be better than the film, I find what I've imagined in my head vastly more interesting than what is being spoon-fed to me by modern graphics and visual representations. Not to say that playing through real-time games isn't inspiring itself. Again, all this has a time and place. So here I'll show you a few of my favorite games and examples of how I use them and things I've drawn while I've played them. I'll review them in order, starting with the most basic, all the way up to the hyper-complex. The good thing is, without graphics, you can buy all these games for less than half the cost of the new Mario Kart. So let's get started. I'll start off by saying many, if not all of these games are going to be roguelikes. If you don't know what that is, let's take a look at that photo I put up earlier. Roguelikes can be defined by the glorious Wikipedia as a style of role-playing games traditionally characterized by elements such as dungeon crawling through procedurally generated levels, turn-based gameplay, grid-based movement, and permanent death of the player's character. Before I get to the main list, I wanted to explain how I'll be organizing these games in accordance to how I use them for creative and inspiration purposes. The lower on the list, the more limited the generative gameplay is, meaning the game's systems are less complex and have less procedurally generated content, or chance for unique scenarios to occur. To put it simply, less things for me to draw or be inspired by. Games lower on the list tend to be a little more bare bones. Not to say that they're any less fun, just for art purposes, they don't do quite as well a job as inspiring me as the games higher on the list. Firstly, I wanted to go over what you're seeing on screen, NetHack, and its predecessor Rogue. I won't go into the exact history of these games right now, but they are some of the granddaddies of the genre, the prototype roguelikes. You are, in essence, a lone adventurer inside of a dungeon. You move throughout it, collecting items and defeating creatures and foes you encounter. These games are punishing. You are meant to die. That's what the high score is, how long you inevitably live for. They're almost the earliest versions of Souls games, where you push further and further each time with the more knowledge and skills you've acquired through each subsequent playthrough. Couple that with lucky dice rolls and a helping hand from the RNG gods, and you might just be able to make it out alive. You can play these games on your phone or even inside a web browser. I myself have only briefly played through these games for more novelty's sake, but they are still played by many. They are worth a playthrough to see where the roots of the genre started, seeing as the popularity of these games has exploded again in recent years. Doors of Trithias is a newer roguelike. With updated pixel graphics and more refined systems, it's a great modern interpretation of the classics with a fresh coat of paint. This game is still in early access, with patches coming out regularly. It has items, a decent combat system, and punishing RNG. Save scumming is a must at this point. Here's the last character I did a playthrough with, a monk who fell to the dark side, becoming a rogue of some sort, trading his pugilist ways for dual-wielding daggers. These games have less of a story, but still put you in procedurally generated fantasy situations. This game is based more around tactical combat than anything else. Unlike later games on the list, these earlier entries take a little more imagination when playing, which can be a good or a bad thing, depending on what you're looking for inspiration-wise. At its core, it'll give you some good fantasy characters, adventuring, and item ideas. Would work really well for a low fantasy-inspired character generator. Now we're moving up on the list to Soul Ash 2. Similar to Trithias, it sacrifices graphics for more complex gameplay. Again, you are a lone adventurer braving a procedurally generated fantasy world. But this time, you have quite a bit more tools for your role-playing purposes. The game has a much higher fantasy setting than Trithias, with multiple interesting races like gnolls, bearmen, orcs, and so on. There's a magic system, a crafting system, a building system, as well as reputations, relationships, and lineages. This game leaves a lot more up to the imagination, which is awesome. If you can get around the simple graphics, which is a good challenge creativity-wise and the point of playing these types of games for me, Soul Ash is an awesome generative tool for coming up with fantasy ideas. The character customization is great with loads of options. Gameplay-wise, it's very similar to Trithias, meaning it's quite punishing. You can, though, set this game to an easier setting without permadeath, which I should say I do for most of these games, seeing as I use them for creative purposes. I do, though, from time to time enjoy playing the game for real and dying a dozen times in a row. Now we're headed to the top shelf. Caves of Qud, another game like Dwarf Fortress with a 15+ year development cycle. Its 1.0 release just came out on Steam, an amazing adventure game with an unprecedented amount of varied depth. Set in a bizarre post-apocalyptic fantasy world, that alone gives you amazing chances for creativity. Each playthrough is entirely unique. You can set the difficulties from casual all the way up to single-life classic roguelikes. Its graphics are a love letter to ASCII with amazing modern takes. Not enough to sour the classic feel, but just enough to keep it fresh and rejuvenated. The game has some of the best character and class customization I've ever seen. You choose from either a cyborg robot or a mutant. The latter has a ridiculous amount of mutations that can manifest on each playthrough, leaving you with randomly generated creatures as you progress. You can spend an indefinite amount of time mixing and matching different attributes and defects, never having to even leave the character creation screen for inspiration. Birds with horns or a tortoise-like shell, it's truly a one-of-a-kind experience. I have spent hundreds of hours in this game experiencing loads of truly unique encounters, from hacking robots to having my head exploded by my evil twin that hunted me across the wasteland. When one of the achievements is unlocked from your death at the hands of baboons via stoning, you know you're in for a good time. I'm hesitant to spoil any more of the game. It's truly one of the greatest roguelikes, if not video games, I've ever played. Here's a few pages of sketches, as well as some finished renders I've made while I've played. I have my tablet set up next to my PC and constantly take breaks to draw in real time what's going on in-game. And finally, drumroll, Strike the Earth, Dwarf Fortress. Easily my favorite game. I have to take breaks since I'll play it for weeks on end. What is there to say about it? If you know, you know. It's the most complex story spawning game of all time. Its systems have been honed over the course of 20 years. It's hard to play other games, especially linear ones, once you've been spoiled by the amazing randomness of Dwarf Fortress. Truly anything is possible. The catch though, the dwarves aren't directly controllable. They are essentially free to do whatever they want, and this is the key to the game's uniqueness and replayability. It's like watching an ant farm that you directly control for either good or nefarious purposes. But on top of that, imagine you could read the ants' thoughts, understand their emotional states, and read a log of their entire life. But let me back up just a little bit. Each new game starts off by generating hundreds of years of history. Gods, heroes, legendary artifacts, and ancient cities are all spawned in the world you just created. From there, you may read about every single one of these noteworthy historical events or figures in what is called Legends Mode, a chronological fantasy history of your newly formed world. It's up to you to piece together the stories, and that's half the fun. It's not distinctly laid out for you. There's just enough vagueness for you to fill in the creative blanks and make unique stories, which works amazing for drawing prompts. There are two playable modes, Classic Fortress and Adventure. Fortress is like many traditional city or base building games, where you're tasked to build a thriving dwarven colony. Dwarves must eat, sleep, drink, and most of all, be perpetually hammered to stay happy and productive. And like I said prior, each dwarf can be inspected individually, their lives generated down to the most minute of details, things such as their personalities, fears, motivations, all the way down to their most basic of needs and wants are all there. Their real-time feelings too. They may have just enjoyed a spray of water to the face as they walked by a waterfall, or disdained the fact that they were forced to kill an invading goblin. Maybe they yearn to write poetry that also can be read once completed, and this is done on a massive scale. Forts can have hundreds of dwarves at any given time inside of them. On top of that, there's a limitless amount of procedurally generated content, invading armies, battles, animals, creatures, visiting heroes, rare dwarven items your citizens will craft using an absurd amount of unique mineable materials. But to do so, you must delve deep underground where horrors await. Procedurally generated great beasts lurk in the shadows, waiting to invade your city. Again, just play the game. There's too much to be said about Dwarf Fortress, and we haven't even touched on adventure mode. I'll keep it brief, but it adds a whole new layer of complexity to an already perfect game. Like the other roguelikes on this list, you set out on adventure. Pick one of over a dozen fantasy races and just live in the world. Like CUD, the things that can happen on any given playthrough are limitless. Get torn to shred by a pack of dingoes or ambushed by a cult of demon worshippers. The difference with Dwarf Fortress Adventure Mode is that systems come first. It's less about fighting and more about just exploring, a living, breathing world. The amount of things that can be spawned from these complex systems are truly staggering. Like I said at the start of this video, it's up to you and the player to have fun, which in Dwarf Fortress is the easiest thing ever, especially in such a densely populated fantasy world. Speaking of fun, I'm going to show some of the work that I've done while playing Dwarf Fortress now. This is just a small amount of my Dwarf Fortress related art I've been saving over the years. I have numerous videos coming up relating to Dwarf Fortress where I'll go over artwork and other things I've created in relation to it. Again, this is a small fraction of the work that I've made while I've been playing. It really is that good for coming up with ideas. In closing, Dwarf Fortress is truly the greatest game when it comes to inspiration for me. Nothing touches it. Again, it's hard to even call it a game. It's a living, breathing storytelling machine. Just sit back and enjoy. Use it more as a tool. I've drawn thousands of drawings, made cartoons, even been inspired to make my own RPGs after playing it. As long as it's around, I'll never stop using it. And good news, the game is in perpetual development. Tarn has stated he'll never stop working on it with his brother. Speaking of Tarn, all this spawned because him and his brother went against the grain, put their foot down against the modern trend of form over function, or better put, graphics over gameplay. To them, it was all about the story, the mechanics, making sure Dor's teeth were all accounted for. I think this coincides directly with this modern era. Things like AI art, crazy graphics, and instant gratification are cool, but call me a boomer, there's always going to be a special place in mine and other people's hearts for kicking back and using our imaginations to enjoy some good old-fashioned fantasy. Guys, just want to say thank you to everybody who made it to the end of the video. If you watch my other videos, I usually like to make these little off-the-cuff messages here at the end. Always just want to say thank you so much for watching. I know this stuff can get pretty nerdy, so hopefully you appreciated it. If you have any roguelikes you like or any other games that give you inspiration, please feel free to let me know in the comments. I always am trying to find other games to play. Everybody makes fun of me because I have like 250 games on my Steam wish list. Usually I wait for a big sale and I buy a big chunk of them. Like I said, these games cost like nothing and you can get so much gameplay out of them. Yeah, if you haven't tried, it's always awesome to just set up a little sketch pad and play through one of these games. I mean, you can really stretch it. I have some videos coming up where I have about 30 seconds of gameplay that I've made into an animation, you know, that's 5 minutes long. So in my head, you know, a little skirmish with a goblin can just be some epic battle. So again, thank you so much for watching. I got a lot of stuff coming up. And again, really appreciate you guys. Thanks. See you next time.